好，我们开始了。各位天维网的观众朋友们，大家晚上好。这里是正在为您直播的天维直播间系列节目之天维新视野，我是主持人林夕。每周二的新西兰时间晚上8点钟，我们与您准时的相约在这里，新视角、新思维，带给您不一样的新西兰。我们的节目呢会在天维网的官方网站、直播、YouTube 等各大平台同步播出。您还可以通过微信搜索天维网，关注新西兰天维网公众号，进入到公众号的直播间来收看我们的节目。每3年一届的新西兰大选将于2020年10月17日正式举行。很多朋友们对此次大选非常的关心，也希望能了解到更多的关于各个政党的执政方针以及具体的一些措施。新西兰天维网也密切地关注着大选，希望能为广大华人朋友们提供有关大选的及时讯息，以及了解新西兰时政的渠道和平台。本期的天维新视野节目呢，我们有幸地邀请到了国家党国会议员，同时也是 Rodney 选区议员 Mark 以及国家党北岸市选区议员候选人Simon Watts。我们想请2位议员呢，与我们一起来聊一聊国家党在此次选举中推行的一些理念，以及华人朋友们关心的问题。The 2020 general election is going to formally take place on the 17th of October 2020. Many of our audience are interested in participating in the voting. Get to know more about our strategies and plans. Sky Kiwi keeps a close eye on the general election and aims to provide a platform for our audience, especially the Chinese community, to learn more about what's going on around us and help our candidates to reach out to our audience. Tonight, I'm very delighted that we have invited 2 great guests to join our program. I'm very pleased to introduce to you the Honorable Mark MP for Rodney, and Simon Watts, the National's new candidates for North Shore. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Simon. Hi, Mark.
Good evening, Jade. It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having us on the show tonight. It's a great opportunity to speak to your audience, and good evening to all of them as well.
Yeah.
Great. Hi, Simon.
Yeah, Jade, as Mark said, absolute pleasure to be here, and yeah, really looking forward to answering some questions this evening. Thanks for having us.
It's great. It's a great pleasure to having both of you here, and welcome to our show. And I'm quite honored to be tonight's host. As you know that, as you said, it's a great opportunity for our audience to get to know more about National's policy and strategies. And also, I think it's a very good opportunity for you to reach out to our audience and our Chinese community here.
Absolutely.
So let's start tonight's talk. So the first survey from the recent survey from Vote Compass shows that voters are mostly keen on these issues: economy, COVID-19, and health. So let's start with these 3 aspects. What is national strategy on lifting the economy?
Yeah, thanks, Jade. Well, Mark, kick off and hand over to you for a little bit more. But look, I guess our policy has been very clear. It's around supporting our business community and creating jobs. And in terms of the investment required to support our businesses, we've outlined a number of new and quite innovative policies, I think, which really provide the support and targeted support of investment to enable those things to happen. Look, the reality is, without a strong economy, it's very difficult, or if not impossible, to be funding the other aspects that we need to protect our communities. And so the strong economy is at the heart of what we've done and what we're planning to do.
Yeah,
I think, Jade, that we'll be very focused on making sure that we've got focused support going to companies to ensure and give them the confidence to keep hiring people, to keep growing. It's the government's job to obviously make sure we're a small trading nation, that we get that supply chain and those trade lanes as open and active as quickly as we can in a COVID world. And it's the government's responsibility just to send very clear signals to the business community in terms of what the plan is, and then they can make their plans and sort of structure their future around sort of the next 12 to 24 months. But I think one of the most important roles of government in the next 12 months is being able to support and give companies the confidence to keep going and actually continue to hire people. So quite a few of our policies are actually being put together and structured around that.
Great. As I could see from your campaign website, economy, better team, and more jobs are the three main aspects that National promotes.
Yeah, so we've got the three pillars, which is a stronger team. We believe that our team is much stronger and better qualified to be able to manage the country, especially around our economic recovery, which of course has got massive downflow and downstream effects in terms of a stronger, more cohesive social, keeping the fabric of our society sort of held together. And just to highlight the strength of our team, you've got Simon on the call today as one of our new candidates, who was the Deputy Chief Financial Officer for our biggest DHB in the country. And that's the type of experience that we've actually got inside our team. Obviously more jobs, because we're focused on creating jobs. People want to be independent. They don't want to be reliant on the government, and they will get out and work if there's opportunities for them. And the government's got a big role to play in making sure that there are more jobs. Well, last time we were in government, we had new jobs coming online each month. And finally, a stronger economy. And that's a fundamental, like I'd said, to all the other pillars that sort of make us a strong country. So those are the three sort of key pillars in terms of what we'll be campaigning on, and we are campaigning on this year.
Okay, great. Coming to COVID, so if National won the election, what would you do in dealing with the pandemic to make New Zealand a safer place to live?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to get the border right. And I've got my own very clear, very firm views about this. And that is that we have a government that's still operating in a contingency type environment. And by that, I mean that they have set up a system in terms of managing the border where we've got a higgledy-piggledy sort of group of hotels all around the country that are not designed to be able to contain anyone. And you always have someone that wants to defeat the system. And so I think that we've got to have a much better plan in terms of being able to stop the virus at the border. And that will provide a high level of confidence for everyone in terms of public health, but also our businesses, our SMEs, so they can actually do some planning without the constant worry of transitioning back into a level 3 or worst case scenario, level 4.
How are you going to achieve that? You're talking about tighter border inspection or control. How are you going to achieve that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think is a very good idea and a fundamental is actually having people tested before they get on a flight to come home. So you're immediately reducing the risk in terms of knowing exactly who's coming back into the country and who's coming across the border. And then I would like to see personally a more centralized system around the actual managed isolation and quarantine, because that is how you're going to control the border much better than the current system that we have, which I've never felt is safe. And it's not sustainable, because as a country, we have to be planning to be prepared and accept the fact that until there's a vaccine, we're facing another 12 to 24 months, maybe 36 months of trying to deal with keeping the virus out. I mean, the virus has got one job, and that is to spread. The government's got one job, and that is to stop it from spreading and getting back into a large community transmission.
I think the other point, Jade, is building on what Mark said. I mean, this virus doesn't grow in the ground, right? It's got to come in some way, and in New Zealand's case, that's the border. And from a business point of view, I'm sure Mark's electorate as much as mine, businesses across the country, the lack of confidence and certainty with this yo-yoing in and out of lockdown is just not sustainable. And a huge number of our businesses in our country are struggling to survive. And that business confidence and certainty of what the future looks like is critically important. And as Mark said, we've got a really strong team of health professionals under Dr. Shane Retty, who's our new health spokesperson, as well as the economic. I mean, we've got to look at these problems from multiple angles, and we've got a great team to be able to do that.
Okay, great. Moving to the next question. Data also reveals most New Zealanders don't want to see international students returning immediately to New Zealand. What's your view on this?
My view is that it's a very important sector for us for a whole lot of reasons. Number one is those ties to the countries where the students are coming from, the cultural diversity that comes into the country, and of course the revenue that it brings with the international students. So it's critically important to our economy. The problem is, and the reason why Kiwis don't have confidence and don't want to see international students return, is because there's no confidence in the border and how the managed isolation and quarantine is working. So they're fearful of the fact that that the virus will be reintroduced and we'll have community transmission. So until we can get that sorted out, it's going to be unrealistic to expect us to be able to start to bring international students back into New Zealand.
Yeah. So you are going to make sure you only bring in international students back in when the border is safe.
Yeah, and I mean, and we'll back ourselves to make the border safe, without a doubt. And that will mean that we can then start to look at bringing international students back into the country. And by the way, you know, bringing people into the country with the expertise and skills that we need to keep the economy moving. We had strong growth when we were in government at 3%. You know, we got to be aspirational and start to move back towards that. There are going to be opportunities for us that present for us as well. As a country, we got to be ready to pounce on those.
Yeah,
I think, Mark, the international students, you said, bring a huge amount of revenue into New Zealand. So I think under a national government, every day we would be waking up thinking about how and what do we need to do to make our borders safe and ensure that's the case, so that we can get that revenue flowing. Every day we don't have it is an opportunity cost foregone to fund other investment, and I guess that would be the incentive every day, is how do we fix the problems and get ourselves safe and secure.
Yeah, I think the Australians are sort of paving the way there when you see that they're using a oil and gas camp, man camp in Canberra that can house 6,000 people. They can control it. They can bring the students in. They can go through their quarantine, managed isolation, and they can come back into the country and, number one, start their education. Number two, the revenue is flowing back into the economy again.
Yeah. Great. So let's moving on to the next one. What is your proposal for enhancing the better healthcare system, and how is it going to get better support from the government?
I'll defer to Simon to this one. This is definitely his area of expertise.
Look, Nationals announced some real exciting aspects around health. Look, we've talked about the aspect and the real need around focus around pharmaceuticals and the funding of specific drugs. We've talked about the establishment of a cancer agency to very much take a New Zealand-wide perspective around how we manage that. We know that there's a significant backlog of surgical procedures that has built up. And actually the reality is that it had built up before COVID hit us because of the poor performance of this current government. And part of that is because the performance targets that were in place within our district health boards, like in business, if you know what you're aiming for, then you generally will hit it. Take away the targets, people don't know where they are. And this government have removed all the performance targets, some of which actually correlate with the reduction in save lives, particularly in the ED department. So we would bring those back in. The district health boards also have large financial deficits, and a lot of that is around some of the funding models, etc. But also we do still think that there is opportunities to allow those operations to run more effectively, and we'd be looking at all of it.
Yeah, and also under the current COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people are concerned of whether or not our health system is sufficient or strong enough to support if there's a huge attack. For example, if our ICU equipments are in place, or if our rescue professionals are in place, if we have a huge flush of sick people, so this is probably the question I would like to ask in personally, that what Nationals are going to do to support a better medical care system.
Yeah, look, I'll answer that as well, but it's all about preparedness, and health is no different to any other sector. The reality is, had this hit and we hadn't got it under control, we wouldn't have had the capability and capacity within our existing health system to deal with it, as is pretty much every other country in the world. And part of that's driven by the need for additional capacity within our health system, so, beds, equipment, aspects like that. And National has been very clear that we would have, an infrastructure roadmap that's, long-term thinking, like we've announced with our roads, and we would build that. You put that resilience and that capacity in place, then you have the ability to deal with the rainy day or the health shock, which we're experiencing at the moment. You don't, it's very difficult. We don't have any resilience in the system. So we'd be very focused around doing that. And I think the other aspect is not just hospitals, it's primary care as well. New Zealand's a very rural country. So how do we deliver, those healthcare services closer to home? And that would be a key element as well.
Okay, great. Now let's talk about one of the things that's a lot of Chinese are interested in, housing. So what do you think are the key issues of housing, and how are you going to tackle it at the moment?
Well, look, the key issue for housing in New Zealand is land,
Yeah.
and land availability. And unfortunately, because our planning systems have not been very good over the last few decades, is that it's put a huge premium price on land, which means that property prices reflect that. So there's a whole lot of issues that you can look into. Is there enough competition on the supply, on the goods and supply side of it? Is there any way that we can sort of start to drive down costs and have settings that can address that? But primarily land is the issue. But if you were to come up to my way and my electorate, the amount of new residential housing that is going up is extraordinary. And new subdivisions like Milldale, the residential property market at the moment is completely, in my view, completely overheated. The properties are selling very, very quickly, and so it's fundamentally moving forward for the next 5 years. Whoever's in government is going to have to be very focused on making sure that interest rates remain low. Otherwise, we're going to create a very bad situation where people go into negative equity, and we've got to be watching that. Whoever's in government's got to be watching those settings very closely.
Okay.
I was going to say, Jade, National have a really strong, a good history in terms of, in terms of what we've done. When you think about the Hobsonville housing, a land company that was established under National, and for those people that live in that part of Auckland, that is a really good example of what's possible. Mark's right, his electorate, significant growth around Millwater and other aspects like that. North Shore, we've got a number of residential developments going in around the place, and we'll come to it soon, I'm sure, but the regulation or the RMA is part of that as well. So
Yeah, right. We also noticed that National Party's leader, Judith Collins, has announced that national government would repeal the Resource Management Act completely and replace it with 2 new pieces of laws. So what do you think are the key problems under the current act, and how are you going to address it?
The RMA is just such a huge piece of complicated legislation, and this has been part of the problem in terms of, councils will make their own interpretations and determinations around what's a very complicated piece of legislation. So I think Judith's proposal is a very good one. She's done a lot of work on this and looking at it, and we'll sort of split it out to try and reduce some of the compliance and red tape around, environmental issues. And I think that's going to be, we need to do something because I think just about everyone in New Zealand agrees that the RMA is not working. It's not necessarily been used, for the purpose and the intent which it was originally put together for.
Yeah.
That lack of predictability, Mark, I think is the issue, isn't it? The outcomes from that piece of legislation, people just don't have the confidence of what the outcome was going to be. And so, again, ensuring that the legislation is, and the rules, particularly around the environment, are very clear, are predictable. That will mean that the process operates as much more speedy, and that's important. I mean, the current government have really struggled to do any reform because you've got the Greens with an ideological position and Labor and so under National we would have a much clearer position around repel and replace with the 2 new pieces, which I think surely will benefit absolutely our local communities.
Okay, great. What are your policies on crimes and drugs?
Mark?
So we've got, we take a very tough and firm position against organised crime and gangs, and of course they're the biggest peddlers and organisers around gang drugs and methamphetamine. So I held the portfolio. Simon Bridges now has it, and we were very clear. I feel like for decades now we've been messing around on the fringes in terms of going directly at gangs. So we've put out a pretty tough gang policy whereby we'll have dedicated units that will be well resourced, that'll work 24/7, and that will target the highest echelons of the, we've got gangs like the Comancheros and the Mongols in here now, and they're serious guys. They're well resourced, and so we got to be serious about tackling them. And if we really get stuck into them, put pressure on them, then that will have a very positive downstream effect in terms of dealing with, even minor violence on the street, because these guys are out recruiting young people and they're responsible for a lot of the social harm, intergenerational harm that we see in this country. So we've already announced our policies are very tough. They are very strong. I remember, when Jade, you were talking about even just things like burglaries, a house burglary. I mean, anyone that suffered a house burglary, it's very personal to know that someone's been inside your own house. That's the one place that you should feel safe. And so I think we should send signals to the police that we're going to run a zero tolerance around that sort of stuff. If you remember back sort of 15, 20 years ago, Rudy Giuliani ran a policy in New York called Broken Windows. And it was quite simply a zero tolerance policy to even minor crime. And it had a very positive flow through effect because it sent a message that they were serious about it. The police were supported politically, the political will was there, and they made the streets safer. And I think that's the exact same approach that an incoming national government would take.
Yeah, it's very interesting that, Mark, that you have mentioned burglaries, because this is the question that I would like to ask you for the next question, because often as citizens, we feel at times we encounter the situation, if burglaries happened, we would hope for a better or more effective police force to help us. And sometimes it doesn't happen as what we expected. So what's national's strategy or plans or help in helping with enhance a better police force or to make it more effective?
Well, firstly, we're very lucky. We do have one of the best police services in the world. They are one of the most professional services. And I know in my own time, I've spent time overseas training and mentoring other police services around the world. And I can say that we can be very proud and very confident that we have a largely corrupt-free, very good police service. In terms of dealing with burglaries, that would quite simply be a matter of the incoming government, us as a national government, setting targets for the police to say that we want a response time to a burglary, say within 30 minutes. We want to be able to have a scene of crime officer actually attend the scene and lift fingerprints, some area inquiries done, and actually some resources and effort put into actually identifying who are committing these burglaries. Because I can guarantee you from my own experience that if someone's done one burglary, they've probably done 30. And if you can identify them and catch them, then you can go back and you actually can clear a lot of offences. So we would definitely have a big focus on that type of crime. The police have always constantly got demands in lots of different areas, whether it be road safety or serious criminal offending, sexual violence, family violence. But I actually think that burglary is one crime that we need a fresh look at and a new focus on.
Right. And what's national stand on cannabis legislation?
Well, yeah, so we're very clear we're against it. If you look at all the evidence around the states and the countries around the world that have liberalised around loose leaf cannabis, two things happen. One is use increases, and number two, there's more harm. So why would we, if in terms of good public health policy, why would we as a country legalise something that we know will increase more use and increase more harm? So we are absolutely 100% against it. And Simon might have some comments on that too from the health side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I also am a volunteer frontline ambulance officer, and actually I was out last week, and it's not uncommon to do jobs that relate to negative health effects and hospitalizations as a result of cannabis usage, and often that's in combination with patients that have underlying mental health issues as well documented, well researched. This is something that National are very clear on, and I know the Chinese community are also aligned with National around this point. There is nothing good that this thing does, we'll be firmly against that.
Okay, great. Let's talk about jobs and taxes, because we've got a little bit time left before we end. Just quickly, how are you going to create more jobs? And what's your stand on taxes?
Well, we'll create in this. Currently, now we're facing a world pandemic with this COVID. So the government's got a couple of jobs to do. It's to protect the border. It's to SMEs run on two. In my view, SMEs run on two things. They run on confidence and they run on energy. And if we can inject confidence back into the economy and give them confidence, then the energy will come back. And the other thing that we have to do, which we've already spoken about, is ensure that we actually have some very targeted funding and support to give business the confidence to keep hiring and keep growing. That fundamentally, that's what we need to do. As I said, trade, we need to support. We're going to have to support our business community to somehow figure out a way to get people moving again, and reestablish and strengthen those trade relationships, and continue to look for ways that we can maximize the global supply chain.
Any incentives for small business to start?
Yeah, we've put incentives in place for new employees. So there is a payment that'll be in place for employers that want to take a punt and take someone on. We think that that's one area that we can help, certainly in terms of creating jobs.
Yeah.
On the tax front there, Jade, I mean, National have been absolutely crystal clear that we will not be increasing taxes in terms of our policy. And actually, for those that live in Auckland, we'll be repelling the fuel tax that was put in place by this current government. You do not grow the economy by increasing taxes. It's pretty straightforward. We've got to trade our way out of where we're at, and exactly as Mark said, that's around targeted investment. We've also announced some of the largest infrastructure programs, in history. Those create jobs and they create assets which return real benefit. Critically important for a future New Zealand.
Okay, so are you quite firm on not bringing in more new taxes?
Yeah, look, I had lunch today with Paul Goldsmith, our finance spokesperson, and we're very clear about the fact, like, just reiterate what Simon said, is that when we're trying to recover from a pandemic and you've had SMEs fight and battle their way through level 3 and level 4 lockdowns, now is the worst possible time to start lowering more tax on them and on households. So it's definitely not the right time for new taxes.
Yeah.
Increased taxes.
Okay. Coming to because we've got, my timing is perfect. We've got 2 minutes. Last question to Simon, because you are going to be the candidate for North Shore, for National in North Shore. And we all know that North Shore, there is a large number of Chinese population in North Shore. So if you win the election, what would you intend to do to help with better communication between the Chinese community and the Parliament?
Yeah, so the Chinese community in North Shore represent about 15% of my constituents. And the reality is I've already started. So I've got a number of quite well-known members of the Chinese community in terms of as part of my support and advisory committees. I think the National Party as a whole, see very close, collaboration and partnership with the Chinese community. I think our values are very well aligned, and in North Shore, absolutely will continue that. I think it's a that working together to make this place better in the future is our joint goal.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we come to the end of our program today. It's thank you so very much again for coming to our show, and it's a pleasure to having you here. Really appreciate that.
Thank you for having us on.
Yes, and very good luck for you, Simon, for your election.
Thank you. I much appreciate that. We're all working really hard.
Thank you. 所以观众朋友们，我们今天晚上的节目呢，就到了尾声了，已经来到了晚间的8点半再次感谢我们的2位议员来加入我们的讨论，也感谢您的收看和支持，也感谢我们的导播。我们呢，下周的同一时间在节目中再见。